in the den of iniquity. Vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment. What a pity. Tomorrow never certain. What dwells behind the curtain? The face of evil lurking with that shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble that either pop or topple. Many will fall and stumble. Let the dozers gather rubble from LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso. Cannons could reach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we can't forget it. I say, run, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we can't forget it. With the rubble steady rising, and hearts are compromising. Convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming, and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these your circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances, and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest, and the righteous in your corners.
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to part 2 of, well, first of all, as you come in, make sure you click that like button and share the stream. This is Getting Ish Done with Ike and Dr. Thunder, and this is the second part, right? A two-parter on tips for your first day at a new job. Yes, a new job, especially in recent times, typically means a nice little bump in pay. New avenues opened, maybe a safety net after a particular opportunity is going bad. But anyways, Dr. Thunder, how's it going? How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. I'm doing all right.
Excellent, excellent, excellent. So we started out with the first part, which you should go check out, ladies and gentlemen, on Dr. Thunder's channel. And he mentioned a few things regarding acclimating yourself to the workplace, both socially and also functionally. He dwelt heavily on the social aspect, which we kind of commented on, in terms of knowing, asking the right kinds of questions and knowing just the right things to say to the right kinds of people, but also knowing whom the people are. And then he also even mentioned aspiring to be that person whom has knowledge, blah, blah, blah. That's why he kind of went off the rails, and we kind of we're like, what are you talking about there? But shout out to you, ladies and gentlemen. Let me go ahead and share this stream. Now, this guy, by the way, how did you say you found his channel again? I think his name is George.
Yeah, I was just I've been kind of doing searches for just tips to this, tips to that, keys to success, all of that kind of stuff. And actually his video, I think I did a search, but I think that because we did a video by, I can't remember the guy that we did last or a couple weeks ago. And that was when it's time to quit, when you need to get out of there. I think my algorithm just started suggesting some different things. And I think that's actually that may be actually how I found this guy.
Makes perfect sense, ladies and gentlemen. And we're going to start from number 8. And again, we're going to give commentary as he goes along here, giving these tips. Let's see, make sure the audio is working and whatnot. Oh, really? Even with the 1 pixel video, you're still going to do this to me?
To ask your coworkers or your boss how you're doing. I mean, get that feedback early on so that you can make adjustments and improvements to your performance. I mean, after all, you want to do your best work, right? And number 9, to make a great first impression.
I guess he went past that was number 8 there that I went past.
Yeah. Maybe let number 7 play. And then yeah.
So just go back to
to start doing your job at a much higher level. So let's move on to number 7. Ask smart questions. I mean, have you ever been in a meeting and you ask a question and then felt like an idiot for asking it? I think we all have. Asking those kinds of questions shows that you don't understand what's going on. And since you're new and you don't know what is going on, you want to ask questions that show curiosity and a desire for understanding. So when a coworker explains, let's say a process, I mean, you might say, well, why do we do it this way? And a question like that shows a desire to learn. Now, most people are going to say, why don't we do it this way? Which sends a completely different message and forces your coworker, your boss, to defend their method. Do you see the difference on that? I mean, one is a smart question with an opportunity to learn, and the other is a negative question where the action must be defended. All right?
Yeah, and I know we listened to this one already last time. Well, was there anything in
Mhm.
addition to my general summary that I gave before, plus just listen to number 7 again? I know you like that little twist that he put in at the end there, or you at least noted the aspect of asking the question in the right kind of way, so as to elicit the right kind of emotional response and from the other person. Blah blah blah. Right.
Yeah, you don't want to put them on defense. And a lot of folks have not really been in situations. They've not been in many situations where, uh, you know, where they're managing a bunch of folks, where there's a lot of pressure associated with what's happening, um, all the time. And sometimes you just have to know when to just stay quiet. Don't say anything. Um, and sometimes you'll have sort of folks that are jokey jokesters, right? And they're trying to create levity all the time. But, you have to know when the time to do that is. Like, just don't be telling jokes all the time. A joke here or there can be, very helpful, but you can start reading the demeanor of your boss, of whoever is managing you, whoever's supervising, and you know, don't be an idiot. I mean, when it's obvious that they're stressed, knock it off. I think sometimes people, uh, nervous talkers, something that I've talked to my students about quite a bit is, I tell them, don't volunteer any information. When you're in a pressure situation, you're being evaluated like a jury or an audition or something. Don't volunteer any information. And if you know you're a nervous talker, really keep the talking to a very minimum. Just don't keep talking, because what'll happen is since you're nervous, you'll say the wrong thing, and then you'll feel like you need to keep talking to correct the thing that you just said that was wrong, and then that makes you more awkward. You're aware that you're awkward. You're more aware of how they're looking at you. It just keeps getting worse and worse. So the best thing to do is just to, knock it off. Just don't say anything.
Very well then, and shout out to Complex Design, right? Shout out to you in the chat. So let's say I'm listening to some other channel, some other panel somewhere around this space somewhere, and they're talking about being at work, being able to maintain, sustain, especially if it's a situation where you have to go to an office and there's shared environment, there's a culture, there's a water cooler talk or whatever it may be. People speak of microaggressions of various kinds, okay? And perhaps we should just, let's say, take them at their word. First of all, do you hear of those types of complaints? In other words, people saying, feeling aggressed upon by others, expressing that others are being insensitive in a particular kind of way, having to do with gender, race, whatever it may be. And how do you typically advise them to do that? Like, or advise your students, for example, to deal with if anyone ever brings up something like that?
Yeah, it's interesting because my tendency, it depends on who it is that I'm, they're, who they are, what race they are, what sex they are, whatever. So all of that stuff is built in. If it's you know, somebody from the dominant society, as it were, then then basically I just try to educate them. You know, um, uh, and it could be about a variety of things. It could be about, well, uh, maybe such and such a person's having a hard time because of X, Y, and Z, whatever. I want people to have sort of empathy for each other and try to understand stuff from somebody else's perspective, that kind of thing. If it was a person of color, then I tell them to stop complaining about it and get to work. See, one thing I'm gonna say this. I'm gonna take this as an opportunity to make this point. I think there's a tendency for people that don't know the context of the conversation happening to contextualize or characterize it as being whining and complaining, right? And whining and complaining instead of actually being productive, right? And in order to make that assessment, a person would have to actually know the background of the person talking, right? So if the person that's talking hasn't accomplished anything and has a history of making excuses instead of getting it done, then okay. But if the person that's talking is hyper productive, then the meaning of what's being said is totally different, right? It's not being used as an excuse. Rather, it's conversation for, this is an issue, this is a problem, this has been my experience. We need to do something about this, or at least be aware that this is happening, and comparing notes, whatever, right? So in my own life, for instance, when I face adversity, I don't start complaining to them about, slavery and Jim Crow and redlining, and I don't start telling them that they need to do something for me because Keisha dumped me. That's not that's not what I do. What I do is I say, okay, that's what it's going to be. I'm just going to outwork you, and then you're not going to have anything to say, and I'm going to outwork you and outlast you. Right? And when you're gone, you burned out on your ish, I'm going to still be rolling. I tell people frequently, especially my students, I say, you'll never be able to catch up to me. Not until I die.
You see, and it doesn't even matter. Well, ultimately, anyways, like that's all that matters, because that's how you treat every situation. In other words, you're going to be working regardless, right? You're not working because of them, and your stance, your position in the race, your particular whatever it is, whatever bona fides you have, right? Whatever reputation you've built for yourself, is going to be 100% irrespective of what they did or did not do. So it's kind of like, this is you're going to outwork them whether they like you or not. Right?
That's right.
And it's not even, at the end of the day, it doesn't even matter. So let me take a step back to what you mentioned. And again, we're talking about people being microaggressed on and feeling hostility in the workplace, right? And such other such environments. And you mentioned something about knowing the context, knowing let me just take it down to here. So Normieville has a very nice little situation for it. It's not, I don't mean to be pejorative when I say Normieville, I'm talking about psychology. I'm talking about the world of professions, whatever, right? I mean, in this area is where you'll be like, okay, a therapist should know the difference, right? Now, between somebody that is stuck somewhere making excuses, blah blah blah, and of course, normal people know it too. Um, what I just noted there about, like, it's very difficult for people to parse, to understand the in between. For example, I understand and I take it seriously when I say that, a therapist is the one that knows the difference. In other words, I understand that there is a kind of a lens that you're going to bring to the situation, plus a body of knowledge, theoretical, plus then the particulars of the person's situation, right? So it's not a thing to be played with. Ultimately, behavior wise, people should leave it alone. And maybe I'm over dissecting this thing. What I mean is, people should back off from judging and be like, "Oh, you're whining," right? That kind of a thing.
Right.
I typically, now that I mentioned that, oh, here I am telling people not to point the finger at your whine and say you're whining. I'm the BAN Dan Pena guy. So typically, when do I point at people and tell them, hey, it doesn't matter? It's typically when I'm talking about a simple means to an end, whereby they've already told me what they wanted, right? It's like they already said, okay,
Right.
this is what I want. And then I'm like, okay, cool. Here's how it's going to be. There's only 2 doors out of this situation. This is the left door. This is the right door. Here's what's going to take. And then when they start meander, then I'm just like, I don't have any patience for that. Right? I'm just like, I'm not gonna hang around and hold your hand around whether or not you want this or gonna take this step or not. But anyways, that's my own little thing aside there. But I think, yes, this little thing that you explained here regarding the understanding, and yes, taking the time to listen to the students. I'm assuming, listening to the person that you're and understanding their situation and seeing what they need. How about mental health help? The therapist that I mentioned, is that ever?
Yeah. Look, it most certainly has been something that I've had to address. It is a real thing. I don't like to use that as the default, and I also, and you have to be sort of careful with this, because you don't want it to come across as blaming someone for something that they can't control.
Mhm.
But they do need to know that it still is their responsibility. Right? Yeah, well, you didn't cause this issue, whatever trauma, or I mean, could have a chemical imbalance, could be something clinical. You didn't create this. It's not your, that's not your fault, but it's your responsibility. You're gonna have to do something about it. I mean, nobody else is gonna do anything. And here's the other thing. Regardless as to whatever the inability is, or the mental health challenge, or whatever it is, you're still going to have to be able to navigate the world within that context. So, I mean, you have ankle weights on. Nobody else has ankle weights, but you're going to have those ankle weights, and you're not going to be able to get rid of those ankle weights. So now what? I mean, yeah, that's a tough thing, but the fact is, if we're honest, all of us have, and this is varying degrees, all of us have some sort of deficit. We all have some sort of, there's something about us that, there's some idiot to our savant, right? All of us have some kind of weird something. And you still have to figure out how to navigate things and not come off as either a weirdo or as somebody that is trying to use their disability to create an advantage.
I'm
'Cause
glad
at
that
some
you
point, peop-
took it there.
at some
Yeah.
point, people don't like that. Okay, I don't want to hear this anymore.
Yeah, I'm glad that you took it there, because I always like to look at things this way anyways. Now, some people may look at it as me being a little too nonchalant or abstracting things away. What I mean is, first of all, I like where you went there with there is always a challenge, right? Um to your existence, right? And a problem and a major cross and maybe some minor crosses, whatever, right? And whichever flavor they may be, right? You just gotta take it. It's not like, oh, well, this particular microaggression flavor, it's not like you would trade it for being the lower caste in India in the gutter somewhere in the 1600s, right? You know, so it's like there's always that situation. Now, there is a thing that John McWhorter likes to use. It's not his example. I believe back in the 60s, somebody wrote a paper about what you would pay not to be black, right? In other words, like, hey, Mr. White Man, what would you give in order to keep your whiteness? Like, would you still, be poor or white rather than be black, blah, blah, blah. And, to show how powerful whiteness was, right? Right. Or how unattractive to be black was, right? That was the kind of the painting, like, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
Now, John McWhorter kind of turned it on its head in more of a recent example to kind of say, and it's all in line again with struggles, right? There's always a struggle of one sort or the other. So saying, hey, look, which struggle would you prefer? Okay. To be an obese white dude with really, really bad skin condition, right? XYZ, or, a black dude in 2023. So kind of flipping things on its head and showing the quote unquote progress that some people perhaps don't really like to focus on, right? Let's say, but saying that, you know what, it's, he'll take the black deal, that there are many things, right, that he'll rather not be. In other words, like, so again, just kind of not to kind of create an equivalency of struggles and all that kind of stuff. Okay. In externally, but internally, I tend to I preach that, man. Internally, I preach, it's it's all, I mean, come on. None of us is getting out of this alive. It's not that serious. Okay. And
yeah. I'm gonna say a couple things here too. So one thing about this is pretty interesting. So see, struggle is relative, right? Okay. And the thing is that since we are locked within our own perception, right? We're seeking to validate, the world, right? We're trying to prove in different ways the world exists. Other people distinct from us, they exist. We're peering out of our eyes, but we're in ourselves, right? So you only have one perspective. You can try to be open to other people's perspectives. That's fine. And if you do that, that gives you perhaps a wider perspective, right? But still you're viewing that from your own perspective. And you can't get away from that. That there's no way to get away from that. And this is one of the reasons why I always look at people with a side eye that represent themselves as being fair and balanced, is being able to see things from other people's perspectives, all of this kind of thing. Now, I know what it is that they mean, and I would celebrate someone that is attempting to embrace other people's perspectives. So, okay. But in the truest sense, we're locked inside of ourselves, right? And we don't really have a choice about that. So the whole struggle is relative thing, that's real because you can't experience anyone else's struggle anyway. All you can experience is your own struggle. And you don't have any frame of reference. Not really. Right? I mean, you can talk to other people about their thing, and that can have a that can be therapeutic, actually, kind of comparing notes. Oh, you dealt with that too. I dealt with that, you know, and you're not alone in this, you know, that kind of thing. But you really don't have a frame of reference, right? Because you're still viewing and listening from within your own perspective. So, if that makes sense. So that's an interesting thing, which, in a matter of speaking, though there are far worse things than other things to struggle with, in one sense, but in the other sense, since each individual can't actually experience what it's like to go through something else and measure it beside their own personal struggle and their ups and downs, you know, whatever that range is, you know. So yeah.
Yeah.
So within yeah.
A guy really loves, and I'll play this right after this last sentence here. A guy really loves his painting. If it's an expensive painting or whatever, really he connects he's that kind of guy, and he lost that painting. Okay, he's a millionaire. He lost the painting, and he feels pain. Okay, versus some guy that just got fired from his job at the factory, can't make rent, blah blah blah, and he feels pain, right? To come out there and try to be the judge of whose pain is, just kind of putting up your point there, right?
Yeah. 100%. And this last thing, I do need to say, because I didn't finish my thought from earlier. So I was saying, people that don't know the full context jump in the middle of the discussion and then, start pointing a finger at someone saying that they're whining and complaining, not knowing anything about where they actually are. See, because in my own life, I don't complain. I just get it done. Right. I don't make excuses. I just get it happening. However, looking forward, as far as creating a better future, creating a better situation for other people that are coming behind me, I do want to acknowledge my own struggles, and I do want to acknowledge issues with the way that things are set up that create impropriety, because I want to try to, as much as possible, level the playing field, make it less difficult for people that look like me. And of course, in particular, for people that are related to me, smaller versions of me. Right. So, or I should say a smaller version of me, because I only have one. So those are totally different things, and they can exist in the same setting. It doesn't have to be just this or just that. That's puzzling to me, that folks, especially people that have kids, are not able to understand that. Like they have like an on-off, it's binary. It's like an on-off switch. They can't operate in that gray in the middle there. It's kind of puzzling to me.
Yeah. Especially, here's the thing, especially when you know that they can in other aspects of their life. Like, there are other aspects in their life where they can do this separation quite well. But there's certain aspects where they can't. Now it's because there's a social and emotional charge typically to this thing. It's really why. So basically, what I'm describing is they get pulled into something which is none of their business, really, right? In other words, saying, "Oh, why are you complaining?" That kind of a thing. When, in other words, it was the pool here is why the pool is what is they get possessed by this kind of a social kind of a pool to make a commentary on something, whereby in other instances they should just know how to demarcate and understand that there different things could be happening in the world, okay, at the same time, meaning coming from different places and people putting on their different masks for different purposes, talking to different people, right, and so on and so forth, right? So it's an emotional thing, as you know. It's like there's a social and emotional thing behind it. It's not just some kind of a intellectual thing, I hope that makes sense. Anyways, but anyways,
Right.
let me play.
Yep.
Number 8, don't be afraid to ask your coworkers or your boss how you're doing. I mean, get that feedback early on so that you can make adjustments and improvements to your performance. I mean, after all, you want to do your best work, right? And number 9, to make a great first impression, you need to perform your job to the best of your ability. I mean, you might think that it's obvious,
It-
but any hint
we
at
skipped
slacking
one.
our performance.
Yeah, so it seems like 8 was very short, basically about asking. Let me see, because 7 was about dumb questions, and then let's see what exactly was 8. Hold
Boss
on.
how you're doing. I mean, get that feedback early on so
One
that to
second.
ask your or the action must be defended. All right. Number 8, don't be afraid to ask your coworkers or your boss how you're doing. I mean, get that feedback early on
Oh, so get feedback from. Gotcha.
Yeah.
How? Gotcha.
so that you can make adjustments and improvements to your performance. I mean,
Mm.
after all, you want to do your best work, right?
Mm.
And number 9,
Thoughts? Asking for
Yeah,
feedback.
this is a tricky one. This is a tricky one.
Yeah.
Okay. I'm going to tell you where this can go bad. And each person needs to know what kind of person they are. Okay. Are you the kind of person that needs a lot of, or that, I'm not going to use the word need, that wants a lot of commentary, a lot of feedback, almost to the almost on the verge of being insecure. Like if you don't hear the feedback, you start feeling like, oh man, I don't know if I'm going to have a job anymore. You know, they didn't say anything about this, or they didn't say anything about that, or how do I even know that I'm doing a good job? Blah, blah, blah. Right. See, you have to know, or are you the kind of person that says, basically, just leave me alone and I'll be fine? You know, obviously there's a lot of stuff in between those two, but you have to know like where you err, because it's possible that that desire you have to get feedback can be annoying.
Mhm.
It can be super annoying. And it's like, oh, is this going to be this guy? It's going to be this all the time. I don't want to have another job. I hired this person to take some stuff off my plate. Now my job is to be this cat's counselor too. I got to be this dude's therapist. I got to like pat him on the back, his encouragement,
Mhm.
his attaboy.
Mhm.
And I'm sorry, I don't want to have to do that. I don't want to do that. I mean,
Mhm.
I do that when I want to do it because I see something in somebody that compels me to do that, right? Because I like to acknowledge stuff that, especially stuff that I think is uncommon. But the moment that you make me have to do that all the time, nah, I'm straight.
Yeah, I would go back to one of his previous pieces of advice regarding finding out whom is whom and really understanding whom the different people are. So if you want to know how you're doing in the job, don't go ask your boss, is what I would say. Ask someone else, or ask someone else how you would know, or how do we know when we're working well? And then be like, oh yeah, as long as Secretary May is happy with the output that you send, then you should be fine. As a matter of fact, check with her as you leave, tonight, to see if the things that you did were blah blah blah, that kind of a thing. So the overall thing about getting feedback 100% correct. Asking your boss, no. And also, especially someone whom is not a, I don't like to use that kind of backslap type of politic, right? I almost see there's almost no benefit to me asking my boss. I want to know what the parameters are of how to, and there's like a million ways other than my boss to figure it out. Even if I'm trying to figure out how my boss evaluates or the kind of person my boss is, I'm not going to figure any of that by asking him, right? I mean, it's like
Nope.
stupid. I'm going to observe, I'm going to learn, I'm going to ask, that kind of thing. Anyways, but good point though. Let's
9. To make a great first impression, you need to perform your job to the best of your ability. I mean, you might think that it's obvious, but any hint of slacking or subpar performance is quickly noticed by your boss and your coworkers. So, whatever job you're assigned to do it to the very best of your ability and ahead of schedule. I mean, negative impressions are formed very early and usually within the first 90 days. And since you're new, you don't want people to get a bad impression of you. And
It's like a short bus advice, or talking to the back of the class, whatever the idiom or metaphor or whatever is that describes this kind of silly advice. Like, oh, make sure you don't screw up at your work. It's like, yeah, it's work. They're paying you.
Right.
I mean, like, I mean, come on. It just literally told you, oh, don't do subpar work. All right.
And don't hand it in late. He also said that. Right.
Yeah, but good one. I guess no comment on that.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's so here's the thing. This is a guy. I mean, how many subs does this guy have? Like a couple 100,000 subs or something.
Yeah.
And one of the ways that you get your channel to grow like that is the kind of information is, I don't want to call it dumbed down, but the target is a larger population of people.
Mm-hmm.
And so that advice actually, it sounds like really, but it actually might be somebody's watching that and saying, you know what? I don't want to make the same mistake I made in my last job. So I want to make sure that I do my best work right from the beginning. Everything's on time. And so that I don't have to start giving the excuses like the dog ate it. My son slobbered all over it. Alvin and the Chipmunks drew on my my presentation storyboard, whatever so you don't have to start whipping those out. And the excuse thing, which I think is related to this, that's something I frequently talk to. I have frequently talked to my students about. In the world that we're in now, college, even institutions that are prestigious, are in many ways basically extensions of high school. Okay, so you have folks that really aren't ready for the real world yet. And so they're willing to use a lot of excuses that, why are you still using that? You should have stopped using that excuse like in 7th grade. You know what I'm saying? Like stuff that is just like totally ridiculous. Why are you still telling me that your printer ran out of ink? That's like most stuff is, especially post-COVID, most things are submitted electronically now. But I'm telling you, if I could tell you the number of times students would tell me that their printer ran out of ink. Now, what that tells you is that they waited until the morning of to print it out, right before the class. Why would you do that? You should have printed it out at least the night before, if not 2 days before. But the reason that they did that is because they were working all the way up until the last minute, fell asleep and said, I can just print it out in the morning. And it's uncanny. It happens all the time. That same thing happens all the time. So putting in sort of, a policy, if you will, a personal policy of doing things far enough in advance so that it gives you more than one crack at it in case something doesn't work. But the beginning of that is just, look, you're not allowed to use certain excuses anymore because nobody gives a crap about your printer. Nobody cares about that. Okay. And I'll tell you, and I can't stand this, but there are some of these teachers, okay, instructors, whatever, that they'll actually look, they'll actually play ball with that. What I mean is, the student gives the excuse and they'll say, well, everything, sometimes stuff happens, I'm sorry. That's just not the real world. And I think folks are doing, teachers are doing students a major disservice, by allowing them to keep up with that.
You know what? That's an interesting thing. It's yes, doing what you described, by this teacher is bad. Now, there is going the other way where you are particularly creative and flexible, and you're doing it in the right way, where and you don't do this for everybody, right? Let's say you're a teacher, you notice this particular kind of student, right? And they're gifted, but they have this one issue, and it's an issue that you can, let's say, relate with, right, or relate to, right? And it's, let's say, even relates to this homework situation, whereby, I don't know, I'm just coming up with something, right? You now tell them, look, okay, here's what's gonna happen. I know, that you intend to do the homework. I mean, that 2-week period there, you did it every day. Yeah, you were pretty good with that, and then you kind of slacked off, and now blah blah blah. So here's what's gonna happen. You're gonna show up 30 minutes before the class, okay? And you're gonna write the blah blah blah, the assignment then, right? That kind of an arrangement where you're going, and it's a question now. You're bending a little bit for a student to accommodate a particular kind of weird not neurotypical kind of thing that's going on with them, right? Which some gifted people tend to have something going on, and you're sure of what you're seeing, and you kind of help to accommodate. What do you think about that kind of thing? Or you're kind of like a one, yeah.
So here's the thing. The issue is, most folks ain't that, idiots fine, right? So you're talking about 99.999% ain't that, right? And so, and they're never going to be that. They're never going to be that great, that creative, that once in a generation talent. That ain't it. And so I think you have to be careful with that, because you establish a certain precedent, and it allows them to sort of stay in that arrested state of development. Also, I'd argue that many of the deficiencies that people have, there are some weirdos that just are really good at a particular thing, and you just deal with whatever they give you, because what it is that they are going to come up with is going to be, so valuable or whatever. I mean, I'm not saying that doesn't exist, but I would argue that for the most part, a lot of these sort of character deficiencies that people have, it's because they were maybe off the charts in a certain way. So people around them allowed them to lag behind in other ways. And the thing is that there are managers, bosses that may understand that this person is what's in that. I kind of know what I'm getting when I get this certain person. But the thing is that almost nobody's going to understand it. They're just going to say, get out of here. And it's tough. And immediately I started thinking about too, different people okay, so family vacation, or just not even vacation, but just family events. Like, okay, we're going to this movie. The movie starts at this time. We need to leave at this time. Or, my son has a baseball game. We have to get in the car and we have to leave by a certain time, right? To get to the game, to get there early, not just right before the game, but 30 minutes before, everybody, we try to get there 15 minutes before the first people get there, all of that kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in order to do that, you sometimes have to play some sort of games because you can't just say, knowing that a particular time is when you absolutely must leave, you can't communicate that time.
Nope.
You have to communicate a time that is like 15 minutes before that time.
I'm known for doing up to 45 or an hour, like especially if it's my wife taking me to the airport or something like that. It's like, nope, I don't play. I'm not I'm not playing with that. Like, I like to be at airports comfortably way long before. I want to sit down and be able to pull out my laptops, chill, have a coffee. I don't believe in rushing into situations. It's kind of crazy. But yeah. Go ahead. Yeah, with the games for sure. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that you figure out how you do it in the sort of reading the clock thing. That's a personal pet peeve of mine, because part of me does not like that I would have to do some extra math to get people to show up on time for something. Okay. And at this point, I'm not talking about the family going somewhere or showing up, at being ready to leave at a certain time. I'm not talking about that anymore. I'm just talking about like, I have a gig. The gig starts at this time. You guys need to show up 30 minutes before that to get set up and be ready. Okay. We already did a rehearsal earlier in the week. Okay. I don't want to have to, like, just with the drummer or just with the keyboard player or just with the bass player, whoever it is, or just with like the trumpet player, I don't want to have to like send them a separate text. Don't just put them in the group text and communicate the same stuff to everybody. But this one knucklehead, I have to send them a separate text with the same information, but with the time that's 15 minutes earlier, 20 minutes earlier, an hour earlier. It's that kind of crap. And you get to a certain point when I know a lot of extremely gifted, extremely creative, extremely talented, world-class in every regard musicians, artists, and the ones that I choose to play with the most often are the ones that can read a clock.
Yep. Very important. Very, very important. Yeah. So yeah, good answer there to that question about not coddling people's deficiencies. People, as a matter of fact, persisting in those deficiencies because they were indeed coddled because they had some other shiny little thing that distracted people, right? Now, also, I would just add that early on, it may be good, but the entire thing, by the way, like, because if I'm picturing this particular teacher whom allows this XYZ, if I'm that person, obviously I have a plan to get them out of this particular crutch, right? Like, it's like, I'm not trying to do this forever. Like, this might just be a way for me to, maybe it's a test, maybe let me see if you'll reciprocate. Like, let me see if this kid really is, if the kid is like, oh damn, this is great, the fact that you allow me to come 30 minutes early, knock it out, and then you trust me that you know that blah blah. And then he reciprocates, and then I can get him into teach him some methods of doing it by himself, blah blah blah. That'll be the program for sure. And if it's in grade school, not college, right? But anyways, let us continue.
Number 10, don't be a suck up or so nice that you come across
It's funny. After this dude has been given 9 points worth of suck up, right? Number 1 through 9 has been suck up, suck up, suck up, suck up. Ask everybody about their kids. Know everything. Ask everybody. And now it's like, well, don't be a suck up. Your life must be hard. Okay.
It's fake. I've worked many jobs where the new hire tried to fit in by being super nice. I mean, don't get me wrong. Being nice is good. But as with anything, there is a balance. I mean, I can assure you that your new team does not want to deal with someone who is overly nice to the point of overdone. Now, if you're a naturally super sweet person, try to contain yourself and let it out slowly and give your coworkers time to get to know you, the real you. And then you can be as sweet as you want because you are who you are and you're not going to change. And the last thing in the world I would want is for a super sweet and kind person to be.
And now he's being he's kissing butt. It's just a whole confused circle.
Any less than who they are. I mean, everything in life is balance. If you're generally curt, then loosen up a little bit until your team gets to know you, and then let the real you shine through. I mean, using this strategy will allow you to make a healthy first impression and build a strong relationship with your new team. Number 11.
Yeah, so I guess it's quite self-explanatory. I don't know if you have any comments on this notion of balance in the social situation. I think in other examples that have been brought up, we have noted that tact is an important aspect of it, right? I believe when you talked about asking for feedback, the first thing you noted was, well, yes, but tact, right? So with all these things that he's mentioned with regarding social interactions, it's like yes and tact for sure. But any special comments there on tact?
Yeah, you know. So he said something that was interesting about don't be too basically don't suck up too much in the beginning. Now you could actually be the kind of person that is generally that is actually nice and warm and like that. But the thing is that people are going to have a hard time. It's going to take them a while to believe that that's actually the case. So part of this, I think, goes under the don't volunteer any information category. Get in, do the job, be good at your job. Don't be standoffish, don't be a jerk, but be careful not to be too sugary, too sweet, too available, it's kind of tricky. It's kind of a tricky point. And there's a little nuance and a little maybe life experience that will help. Hopefully that could help, help you to make the right judgment, the right percentage of sweet, the right, available. Like, and it's interesting because I don't think of like from The Office, I love The Office. Dwight Schrute, I don't think of him as being a sweet person. Actually, he's pretty abrasive and intentionally not accepting of something that he thinks is in addition to what he should just get, just the paycheck. I don't need you pat me on the back kind of a thing, except for from Michael. Then he wants Michael to say, you know. So anyhow, but Dwight is too willing to do anything Michael wants all the time. And so Michael is irritated with Dwight. It's like most episodes, there's a visceral irritation that Michael has of Dwight, right? Because he's too willing to do stuff. So yeah, you just have to, you have to be careful with that. Now, I don't have any problem. I don't have a problem because I'm like in my own world and I'm not paying attention to you anyway. So it ain't an issue for me. But
Yep. Yeah, he did say if you're a little bit more curt that you should, kind of address. And yeah, if your issue is being, is trying to pretend to be human, right? Then there are ways of pretending to be human for as long as you have to pretend to be human and all that kind of stuff. And then you can go find a place to recharge and see how maybe you got 15 minutes a day max that you can pretend to be human before you absolutely shut down. But there are ways, I learned listening techniques and facial expressions, facial expressions help. But anyways, it's Dusty Shackelford, number 11.
Timing. Don't arrive too early for work. Maybe 10 to 15 minutes is ideal. And don't leave too early or right on time because that shows you're a clock watcher. And then take a short lunch if you can, but in all likelihood, your coworkers are going to want to take you out to lunch on your first day. But I've always packed my own lunch and ate in the cafeteria just to save time and money. Number 12.
Don't arrive too early? What? I mean, okay, I'm not going to say anything. Go ahead. What do you think about his time advice there?
Okay, so this reminds me of another. I mean, this is interesting. One of the reasons why that series, The Office, did so well is because it's just full of all of this regular stuff. All this Normie ham and egger stuff. I mean, it's jam-packed full of it. So one day, Oscar, who comes out during, I can't remember, it could have been season 2, he comes out as gay. So Oscar's gay, and Oscar is interested in one of the one of the warehouse workers. So he comes in so early. He comes in early so that he can, because the warehouse workers come in earlier, so that he can say something to this guy. And he says something to him, and then he comes up to the door. He says, "Why are you here so early?" He said, "Well, I'm always here this early. So I've never seen you here this early." So then he goes to the office door to open it up, and of course the outside doors are locked. So then he's got to go back and sit in his car for an hour before the office is open. But anyhow, but
Yeah,
the
don't
whole,
be too early.
say it again.
Say, don't be too early.
Yeah, don't be too early, because you end up looking like you're too eager. You're too, like, what's, do you have a life? You mean this is the only thing you have going? That kind of thing. But you can also show up super early just because you have a routine, and that wouldn't come off as being too eager. So for instance, for me, I arrive at work an hour and a half early or more because I'm going to do a live stream in my car. So, that's a different sort of thing. And then what was the other thing he was saying? So don't arrive too early and don't be a clock watcher, leaving right on time. Yeah. I'm not sure what I think exactly about that point.
Yeah, it, there are not many jobs, or shall I say, at least he is talking about only a subsegment of jobs. What percentage, I don't know. But most jobs now, it's perfectly fine if you leave at whenever you're supposed to leave, because typically you're measured on some type of productivity metric, right? Whether
Right.
you are an accountant or you are in the accounting department just doing billing and answering these phones. And I'm sure it's about how whether you finish, tabbing and tabulating all those invoices that day. And if you didn't, yeah, you show up a little early the next day, you before the 9 a.m. meeting, so it's done. That kind of a thing, right? It's rare that people are like watching you closely as far as the time goes. Now, yeah, it doesn't matter. Now, what I come early. I used to like to stay. I used to show up like at 6 a.m. when I used to like go to an office, right? Just because of the routine thing. I kind of liked it, and then you get some time in the quiet, no one in the office. You get that, it's great, right? um,
Right.
and then I would generally leave on time though, and then but if I had to stay, if I had to get something done, I could get it done from home or whatever. Again, because but yeah, so I think that not leaving, I think that's a little, especially these days, it's not as important.
Yeah, I don't think it's as important. Uh, there was an episode. Oh, so this is interesting. Another episode of The Office. So the company Sabre, um, which is a printer company, acquires the last existing Dunder Mifflin, and it saves them from, I don't know, bankruptcy or whatever or insolvency or just going out of business or whatever it was. And so the CEO, president, CEO, owner of the company, um, what's her name? Joe. She goes by Joe. And so she comes to the office. She's in the office. She takes up the conference room, and that's her workspace for the day. And it's what is it? St. Patrick's Day. It happened to be St. Patrick's Day. So everybody is in the office is eager to leave to go so that they can go, and drink green beer at a bar, right? Where everybody was going to meet afterwards. But because this was early on and folks didn't really know Joe that well, and Joe didn't know them very well, they also wanted to put on a certain, put their best foot forward and all this kind of stuff. So Michael keeps going in to sort of check her temperature on when it's going to be okay to leave. And she keeps giving these really abstract, ambiguous answers to the question, and he says, well, it's 5:00. So I'm going to send everybody home. And he's like, well, and she says like, well, if you think you got a good day's work in and you're proud of what you did today and next like that, then yeah, that's like that. But she was still staying there. Right. So everybody ends up staying in the office. They should have left at 5. That's when they're supposed to leave. They didn't leave until like 8:00 because she kept sitting in the conference room where she could see everybody. And so anyhow, that was a long story, but there is something to when it is that you leave if there's an expected time to leave and you're being introduced to other people, especially a supervisor, that is a strange sort of scenario, and perhaps that's more of what he's referencing.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
12. Don't be a diva. No matter what your status, don't start demanding things from your coworkers. I mean, it's okay to be firm, but for people who start a job and act like demanding divas, all they're really doing is lacking confidence inside and trying to cover up their insecurities by ordering everyone around. I mean, a lot of new hires don't realize that they just need to be honest and upfront from day one so their coworkers don't get the wrong impression. I'm not suggesting to be someone you're not, but be vulnerable and let people see the real you. I mean, all too often, new hires hide who they are and then false impressions form. Be you. Be genuine, be there to help, and do it enthusiastically. And when you first start a job, no one knows you. I mean, you're either going to form good impressions or bad ones, or even worse, none at all. At least with a bad impression, there are some people that will be drawn to you.
Yeah, it's very interesting to see how someone whom uses the notion of social harmony and how everybody feels about each other and how everyone is vibing and whether the vibes are good. Someone whom uses that and pays a great deal of attention to that and uses that to maneuver in the world. And it's funny to notice the things that they notice, right? Because this is the kind of guy that he is and doesn't, I've never seen him before, but I can tell, right? Or he's a great actor. Right. And he's been focusing on all the kind of things which I would just have taken for granted with regards to just being a human being, right? It's like, oh well, be nice, but don't be too nice. Ask questions, but don't be a diva. Oh, you want to be this, and let them show you real stuff. It overcomplicated, added like 17 dimensions to a social space that I just see as a single dimensional thing, right? Which is, just avoid issues, right? That's the single dimension in social space. And he is having all this nuance and all this context and all these so on and so forth, which might be important which definitely is, not might be, very important for people whom are just like him. But I think that something such as this the last two about the diva thing and then not being too much of a suck up, or probably that was a previous one. Those kinds of advice,
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, it's like it sort of it sort of contradicts. He's contradicting himself as he's talking. He's talking about not being too much of a suck up and basically meter that out so they like this. But then he's telling him to be vulnerable. That is hogwash. Be vulnerable. What the heck? What? This isn't freaking couples therapy. What the heck am I being vulnerable?
I don't know where that one came
What kind
from.
of terrible advice is that?
Yeah, I don't know. What's this guy has over 300,000 subs. He's been talking about how you should love everyone should love you. Now he's talking about being vulnerable, showing the real you, letting your heart shine out here in these streets.
Do you see Bob's comment, especially?
Yeah, he said
first
Square
one?
Rainbow.
Man, look, if somebody tells you, oh my goodness, there's certain people you just should not listen to their advice. Now he's given a lot of good points, and I think you are being generous by saying that he is bringing out nuance. All this nuance. I think you're being generous. A lot of it is kind of surface topical stuff. I mean, and a lot of it is good stuff. I'm not trying to totally crap on the video, but this last point of the points that he's made, this is the one that I think is just hogwash. I almost like everything about it. I think it's just hogwash.
Mhm.
Yeah, be
Yeah,
vulnerable,
yeah,
so that they can see the true you. No, man, I don't
yeah,
care
and
if they
then there was
never
that
see
kind
the
of
true
weird
you.
ad hominem little thing he went on, like this supposed diva whom you're not supposed to be. Say, oh, and this diva, by the way, they're just trying to cover their insecurities. And it's like, dude, like, what? We're not your therapist, bro. Like, like, we don't need to hear your hear you kind of do your anti diva chant and incantation, so that you can center yourself again. But
I'm gonna tell you, man, I don't care if coworkers I mean, look, now I have now let me qualify this. Let me qualify this. All right. Because there's people that I work with that are my friends. They actually are friends. Like I would interact with them even if we weren't on the same job. Okay. That's different. That's a different category. Being vulnerable with someone that is your friend, that's cool. I don't have an issue with that. I do want them to know something about me, understand me, know me, that kind of thing, because we're friends. Okay. People that I work with that I'm charged to do a particular job, I don't care if they know the real me at all. I don't care. I don't care. I'm going to do a good job. I'm going to conduct myself with professionalism. I'm going to be on time. I'm going to, you know, every performance, I'm going to, deliver a top-notch performance. I'm going to do all the stuff that I'm supposed to do. And I'm going to do it very well. And I'm always going to be cordial. I'm always going to be friendly. I'm always going to be nice. And look, I don't know most of you ninjas, and I'm an introvert. And I'm still saying something to you. I'm still, hey, how are you doing? How's the family? Stuff like that. Look, man, I'm already, so that is not, look, they don't want to know the true me. The true me wouldn't say nothing to them.
oh yeah,
The
there's
real
always
me.
there's an
Oh my
approved
goodness.
version of what you're supposed to be able to share of yourself. Like, oh, let's say you decided to, oh, let me lay it out. Let me tell them what I'm really thinking, right? And it may not even be anything kind of crazy. It may not be anything disturbing at all. You're just going to lay down some deep thoughts on them on a particular topic, and then they're going to be like, oh, like you killed the vibe or something. It's like, oh, so you guys have been bugging me all week to talk to you, but you
Yep.
really don't want me to say anything other than read
That's
from the
right.
approved hymnal, so that we all just kind of squawk back and forth at each other and echo,
That's right.
right?
100%.
And
100%. Let me tell you, man. Let me tell you. And especially in a place like academia, where there's an expected groupthink, there's an expectation that you're going to say certain kinds of things and nod and smile. But in many ways, similar to what a lot of churches, what the expected conversation is going to be, right? And look, I'm just not going to engage. I'm not going to do that because, I mean, you don't really want to know what I think. I just tell people that. I tell them that. I say, so hey, Sean, what do you think about this? I say, you don't want to know what I think. You're not going to want to hear what I think. Now, every once in a while, somebody will try to press and it'll be like, oh yeah, we do. Yeah, sure. We want to know. And I'll tell you, when I was a young man, I took the bait. When I was a young man, I took the bait once or twice. I ain't doing that anymore. It's not worth it. It's a loser. It loses every time. It loses every time. You know, and now see, so the thing is that if people don't actually know, say if you have some controversial view or whatever, and that's the thing that you're kind of concerned that they might not vibe with you anymore because you have that controversial view. See, the thing is that if you never tell them that, then, you know, since they don't know, it's not a big deal. But once they know that that's the deal, now they're going to have an issue dealing with you. And the thing is I'm realizing this more and more. Most people do not possess the ability to have significantly different views from people that they are aware of and still interact with them in the same way. Most people, they have a really, really hard time doing that. I don't have an issue with it. I can do it all day. It doesn't bother me at all. We can totally disagree because I know why I'm here and I know why you're here and I know what job you're doing, what job I'm doing, and how that relates. And as long as we can do that, I'm straight.
All right, let's see if he can redeem himself. Okay, let's see if the good man here can redeem himself. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, this is part 2. The first part was on Dr. Thunder's channel last week. Okay, and we're here every week, Wednesday, 6:30, and that'll be Pacific time. Okay, because it's 9:30 Eastern Standard Time every Wednesday, getting this done. So, let's see.
Number 13, don't be a know-it-all. Just be humble and let your coworkers teach and enlighten you.
So he's pulling out all the stops. He's now making his repetitions obvious. Like he's like I don't know exactly the repeat of what this is, but this just obviously sounds like something he has said before, or a contradiction of something he mentioned before. I will let him continue here, but just to be clear, he seems to be saying be teachable, right? Be teachable. Right. Similar to he already asked you before, or he has already told you before about 3 times to go ask and learn, right? I don't get what people do when they. Now I'm on my thing now, but I don't get this thing that people do when they repeat themselves. Like
Well, he wanted 14 for some reason. 14 sounded like a good number, you know. But hey, you know, I'm looking on the internet and I noticed that there's one that's got there's a tips for starting a new job that's got 10 points, and there's one that's got like 12, but nobody's done a 14 point tips to start a new job.
Yeah, it's like, so, he's got 14 of them, and they're all labeled and everything. So it's like, oh, this is a plethora.
You got to find the sweet spot, man. You got to find the sweet spot.
Okay, all right, cool. So be teachable, be teachable, be coachable. Let's see. Nope, that did not work.
Know it all. Just be humble and let your coworkers teach and enlighten you, even if you know what they're talking about. I mean, every company does things differently. So hear them out before you try to start doing everything your way. And lastly, number 14, lay off social media.
Doing things your way, doing things your way, doing things your way. And we already started here in the last one, which is number 14 about social media. But, you know, in the last kind of 10 minutes we have here, let's see this idea of how do you go about doing things your way? You seem like the kind of guy that's going to end up doing things your way. Everybody anyways tries to get away with what they deem necessary to get away with, or, you know, something they found inefficient, or, you know, like, you know, just all ridiculous within the process. I tend to not be a process person myself. In other words, it's not that I don't value process. Of course I do. It's a question of understanding that the goal or that the mutability of processes right, is more important. So I'm operating in process space where processes can change, where they can take different forms and such. That's the space I like to be in, as opposed to just being locked within the tunnels of a particular form, as though I was some kind of idiot or something, right? So yes, I can understand your particular tunnel, your particular form, your particular process, whatever this map that you've drawn out here is. But then I'm gonna go ahead and try to do it my way, but I try to give you I try to excel on the results end, right? That is, by the way, why I'm doing it my way, because I find it to be easier and I'm going to excel, blah blah blah, so on and so forth, right? So the employer, or the person whom is in charge of the process, they tend to be more forgiving with things like that, because they're like, oh, anyways, he knocks it out of the park anyways. Who cares that he doesn't use Ledger X or whatever? But anyways, what are your thoughts about this? Doing things your way versus the company way.
Yeah. So, yeah. So the process thing that you're talking about, this is interesting. As far as being more interested in the results that the process facilitate rather than the process itself. Malleability and mutability rather of malleability, mutability of the process. If it's shown that something about the process is deficient, then is limiting whatever the outcome or the speed of the outcome, then the process needs to change. All of that stuff is great. The only place where that gets you in trouble is when you have a lot of people working on the same project and you can't get people to to comply with a particular process. Yeah, and that's not to say that someone else needs to be dictating the way that you think about what you're doing. There's an episode of man, I don't know what's up with The Office today. The Office, when what is it, D'Angelo Vickers, I think that's the guy's name. It's Will Ferrell, and this is when they were still looking for another manager, and they bring this guy in, and Michael Scott has already decided he's moving with Holly to, where did they move to? Seattle or something. And so he was on his last 2 weeks of his job, and he's sort of training D'Angelo, kind of trying to give him the, some tips and things. And some of the stuff that he says is valid, but a bunch of the stuff is just like hogwash and stuff. And so D'Angelo has like a fear of sort of public speaking or something, and so he has him being the MC for this what is it, what's the name of that, Dundies, this Dundies Awards, which is it's silly, Dunder Mifflin Dundee Awards, which is an annual thing that Michael was doing just at the Scranton branch, the one that he manages. And it's really silly. They meet it like it's at a Chili's or something, the restaurant Chili's, and they set it's just like way over the top. So anyhow, in training and in talking to D'Angelo, trying to get him to feel more comfortable, not only did Michael want him to say specific things, but he was trying to control the way that he thought of those things. Like, you have to do it this way, and you have to be thinking this way as you do it, and it's like, And the other people in the office are like, dude, why do you care? Why does he have to do it the way you say? If it's the same thing, why you have to be like in his mind controlling the way that he is accessing the information? So, um, so it's not about. So I think there can be some flexibility, even if you're doing a team project where there are deadlines and the stuff that each person does is facilitating or hindering something else that somebody else is doing, whatever. Where as long as the objective is met, it doesn't matter how you come to how you figure it out. So that's cool. But sometimes you'll have people that they just won't comply, you know. And it can be anywhere from just submitting stuff late on purpose, submitting stuff late to well, not on purpose, they just don't know how to read a clock or a calendar. Submitting stuff late to not doing it the way that's necessary, missing some little detail that screws everything up, or whatever, this kind of stuff. Or one of my favorite things that happens in Black church frequently is when you've been planning for, months for a Christmas service or something, and you've written all of the music out and you've done all of this stuff, and, everybody was in agreement about what it was. And then you're in the middle of the song that everybody's been rehearsing a particular way, and they just decide to just do something different. Totally disrespectful to all the work that everybody did. And apparently they, in the moment, sense that the Holy Spirit wanted them to do something different. And so the moment supersedes all of the time and all of the moments before that moment, when I'm assuming that the Holy Spirit still existed. It could have communicated. Okay. I kind of shoehorned that one in there, but there you go.
Indeed. Now, I found this list here of the stuff, but I know he has one more to say about social media. And then I would like to just read this because when you look at all of them together, some things are quite let's see. Anyways, let's see about social media, especially given the fact that if you put your work business in social media, or you go crazy on social media, you might get canceled at your work as well.
And avoid using company provided equipment and internet services for personal use. Even if they tell you it's okay, don't do it for at least 6 months after you start your new job. So there you have it, my friend. My 14 best tips.
That was a straightforward. It's just like
now here's the thing. He actually isn't making the point that you were making. The point
he's just like he's talking about some straight up device and sites deal.
Right. He's talking about don't use the company's basically their computers to do personal stuff. That's basically what he's saying. And he just used social media as a sort of avatar for a bunch of things that could be. May not even be stuff that's necessarily online. It could be you getting on YouTube and watching cat videos, But I think the point that you were making was more interesting.
What are your thoughts about how to manage the social media landscape? Are we in a position now where things are a little bit more forgiving, where it doesn't matter if you have some crazy stuff online because everybody's got some crazy stuff online? Everyone can find your old MySpace and some embarrassing thing that you did. But go ahead.
Yeah, so it's a risk, and depending on what your job is, I have the kind of job. I tell people this. I've said this before. I don't. I don't have FU money, but I have tenure, so FU. um, I used to say, I don't have FU money, but I have FU tenure. But it seems better to
Yeah, yeah.
put the FU at the end.
It's a nice little little yeah. Okey doke, turn around, boom, punch.
Yeah, and the thing is that everybody doesn't have jobs where, as long as you're not doing like, something illegal, as long as you're not doing anything illegal, as long as you're not breaking federal law, whatever, I have a job, and the institution that I work at and higher institutions of higher learning, although not necessarily all to the same extent, are supposed to protect their faculty, their tenured faculty members in particular, because the academy is supposed to be a place where you're supposed to be able to say things that are inconvenient, go where the evidence leads, upset the apple cart, eat sacred cows, sacred cow hamburgers. You're supposed to be able to do all of that kind of stuff. Comment on, issues in society, politics, whatever, religion, whatever it is. That's actually the purview of the academic. The academics are allowed to and is supposed to be able to and free to express those inconvenient opinions. There were three, and there are three. There are ministers, right? A minister doesn't necessarily have tenure, but a minister, especially if we're talking about one of the Abrahamic religions in traditional, aka Orthodox versions of those. So Orthodox Christian, Orthodox Judaism, Orthodox Islam, those ministers in their sermonizing necessarily, if they're not intentionally avoiding sections of scripture, they're necessarily going to say things that are going to be to the general society offensive. Right? That's the gig. Comedians are supposed to be irreverent and are supposed to press. Right? And so those three in particular, academics, comedians, and artists of different kinds. You have protest music, and then as I said, what did I say? Academics, comedians, artists, and then what was the third one? Ministers, right? So those three are supposed to. So if that's your job, then social media, that's where you do business, right? In this world, that's where you do business. Now, if you don't have a job like one of those, if you're just an accountant somewhere, or maybe you're an engineer, right? Or maybe you're whatever it is that you are, if you're working for someone else's company, maybe you're a lawyer, you're working for someone's firm, whatever it is, you're the CEO of a publicly traded corporation, then now your social media, now they can get rid of you based on stuff that you say. And so you have to know that. And, probably not say anything. Most of the CEOs that I'm aware of, they're pretty quiet on social media. So that's a calculus you have to make. That's not a job that I'd ever want, because I want to be able to say what I think. You
Yep.
know, now I would make, a lot more money if I was doing that. And so that's the trade-off. You take the money, that means you can't be posting, wild and crazy stuff on social media.
Yeah, and it's like the reward thing is generally speaking, if you go the entrepreneur route, in other words, the Elon Musk route, where your name is on everything, right? Then
Yep.
the reward is you get to say whatever you want. The risk is, your name is on everything, and there's a huge target on your head. But it's looks like a fun life though.
Yeah, you can say anything he wants. Somebody like the Joe Rogan,
Yeah.
Joe can say anything he wants to say. He can interview who he wants to interview. He can do what he wants. You can't cancel him. They tried. You can't do anything. He built up his own infrastructure. I mean, they try to cancel him, he gets more views. It's like, hey, some folks, you just have to recognize that they just not going down. It's just not going to happen. And of course, don't think that you are safe just because you said something about a year ago, you thought it was going to blow up, turns out nobody cared about it. Yeah, don't think that you got away, because they will dumpster dive 10 years into Twitter posts and stuff like that to find something that you said, way back when all the rules were different, right? It wasn't a cancelable offense then to say what you were saying. It wasn't even controversial. It was just funny. But now,
Indeed.
yeah.
So, ladies and gentlemen, we have come to that time. We've come to the close, and this is the close of part 2, the second and final part. Check out part 1 on Dr. Thunder's channel. And this is about tips for your first day at work. It's interesting that number 4 says, ask for help, okay? But think through it, right? Think through it and try to solve it your own way, okay? Think through it before, right? Am I correct there that he's kind of saying ask for help, but think through it before and try to solve it your own way. Number 13, don't be a person who knows it all. Rather, it's either a repeat or the few interesting things going on here with this.
Yeah.
Don't misuse company resources.
Yeah.
Know the dress code. Go ahead.
No, wait a minute. The thing that he says, ask for help, but think through it. So, and even asking questions, number 2, before you show up for first day. Okay, but then ask for help, but think through it. Don't just ask any question. Don't just blurt something out, right? See, this is interesting.
Ask more questions in meetings. Be curious.
Right. So here's the thing. There, it's like, what is that version of it? That people say there's no stupid questions, right? And or there's no bad questions, or something like this. And the other version of that is there's no stupid questions. There's just stupid people. And you don't want to look like a stupid person, like an idiot. And I'm going to tell you, first day on the job, 10th day on the job, however many years I've been on the job now, I still have, and I still have the same approach. More of that approach now, actually, than I did when I started. And that is, I just don't say anything. I go to meetings, I sit in the back, or even if I'm sitting in the front, it doesn't really matter where I sit. And I don't say anything. I just listen. Because if you allow people to talk long enough, they'll teach you about them. And frankly, I don't know how much I want to teach people about me. especially if I actually have things to say that are not going to be received well. So I'm not going to volunteer anything. I'm not going to say anything unless somebody directly asks me a question or it's directly related to my area. But I'm not going to say anything.
The power of differential knowledge is something that some people overlook for some reason. I don't, like it's like you always want to, and don't wish to be all Machiavellian and conniving about stuff, right? All the time. But knowing more about someone than they know about you, right? Seeing their cards, but then them not seeing yours. That's always a position you want to be in. There's no reason to, as you said, volunteer information. Anyways, I've noticed that people ignore that. People ignore that idea of, hey, you don't have to let him know that you know that he's wrong. Let him think that you think he's right, or something like that. Like
Yep.
or just there's just certain things that they're not necessarily your responsibility to arrange.
Yeah. You
Anyways.
look, man. The whole look that Kevin Samuels talked about. What is it? Shame, insults, guilt, and the need to be right.
Mhm,
That need to be right,
mhm.
that gets you in trouble.
Yes.
You need to lose that need to be right. I don't care if other people know that I'm right. I will let them look. I'll let them be wrong and be totally satisfied and content in them being wrong, publicly being wrong, and I know they're wrong. And I'll be like, okay. And I know that sounds terrible, but the thing is that you have to, you have to kind of get there. And because what is it, casting pearls before swine,
The opposite tends to be the terrible one, as a matter of fact. The opposite tends to be, the opposite, which is, going in and saying and cajoling people and convincing and this and what, needing to be right, for example, tends to be the disastrous route. You
Yep.
simply just leaving people alone. I find it to be like, because yeah, like, it's a little thing of mine. I don't want to harp on it, but leaving people alone, generally speaking, or leaving things alone, sometimes is the most, maybe innocuous is not the correct word, but it's like, I mean, how much less harm could you? It's like, hey, I left it alone, right? It's like, oh, but you could have told the person, and then it's like, dude, a lot of times life is complex. People are complex. There are all kinds of things going on. Why do I think that I'm me, this stray little bullet or stray little dust particle is just gonna come in and fix their life, or or it's like, come on, they got a whole to your whole point about living in from your own perspective. Like they have a whole movie going on there that I don't even know. It's been going on for like 42 years now. Okay, like I don't even know the half of it. All
Right,
right,
right.
let me just leave that alone.
100%. 100%. And yeah, 100%. And it's not, look, I'm not going to look, I'm not going to give you something that you don't know how to value. I'm not going to do it anymore. And I used to do that. I've done that as a young man. I did that. But I'm not going to give you stuff that you don't know how to value. You don't know that it means something. You don't know that it's important. You don't respect it, whatever. I'm not doing it. So if that means that I have to allow them to just be wrong and publicly wrong and everybody see them being wrong, okay. I'm okay with that. It sounds bad. I know. I mean, it sounds like you don't have compassion and care for your fellow man and all that kind of stuff. Sometimes the best way to care for your fellow man is by letting them embarrass themselves.
All right. So did you already today is Wednesday.
So
So
tomorrow night, I'll
Mhm.
have a uh, Two Dads React. So we'll have a show tomorrow night, and yeah, last couple of those went really well. That show seems like it's starting to, it's
what is going on in the
starting to
Appalachian
hit
Forest?
pretty good.
Is it-
Oh, right.
All kinds
All
of
kinds of
strange-
crazy
all
stuff.
kinds of crazy-
Yeah. Yeah. If you see something that what is it? If you hear something, no you didn't. If you see something, no you didn't.
Uh-huh.
They have this, it's this weird thing. Just get on TikTok and
Mhm.
and search for Appalachian Mountains in like strange occurrences or something. And you'll see this and you'll see it several times, this expression about not seeing anything. And if you hear somebody talking behind you, you recognize their voice. No, you didn't. Don't go to the woods after night, after try to avoid the woods period, but don't go after dark.
Oh man, I
Yeah.
listened to this listened to this documentary about real life story, right?
Mhm.
This hiker deep in the forest, rarely kind of traverse trail deep in the middle of the Pacific Northwest, comes across these wild men, basically. Right? So these people are these are forest people, right? And
Right.
the scariness of it going through like their ability to track him, and because he did all kinds of things, and the next day, like boom, they were back there. But anyways, it was scary as heck, and I'm sure many people have disappeared obviously in those places, and it makes perfect sense that there would just be some wild, I mean, we know about serial killer types and whatever, right? And then you could just
Right.
put two and two together. Then it's like, why wouldn't I just be out there in the trail, hone my jungle instincts, kind of just track and freak human beings out, maybe. But anyways, was a pretty scary situation. Like he barely escaped with his life, basically. The guy in the and he no one knows who those people are that he saw. But anyways,
Yeah, and there's this thing about these what is it? These moon people or something. There's all kinds of like just really strange stuff. And that show is it'll be 10:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time tomorrow. Tomorrow morning I'm going to be talking about let's see here on Rolling Thunder. I'm going to be talking about, let's see here. What is it? Here, I'll tell you in a second. Be talking about, here we go. Why feminism breeds hate in women. And as a woman, and there's like a growing number of folks now you're hearing use the term misandry. I heard Candace Owens use it not that long ago. This woman, and she's got a channel called The Happy Wife School. And it's a white woman. And it seems like she may have had some history with some feminism stuff, and she sort of turned a new leaf or something. It's one of those kind of stories. But The Happy Wife School. This particular video we're going to look at is got about 60,000 views, and her channel is not a big channel. She's got less. I think she only has about 2,000 subs, but good content on her channel and things. But we're going to be talking about why feminism breeds hate in women, right? If it's just about opportunities, right? If it's just about, women being empowered and this kind of thing, then how come it seems like it comes with a healthy dose of misandry? Why does why does that seem to be the deal? And the expected end, like once women have achieved at a certain level, why disproportionately do they have these really a lot of animus, against men? So it's just kind of a interesting sort of discussion we're going to have tomorrow morning. So come and check that out. 8:30 a.m. Eastern Standard Time.
Word them up, word them up, word them up. And yes, Bob, I have watched the Blair Witch Project. Yes, I watched it 1999. Yes, yes, it was a. I did think about exactly that while I was talking about the Northwest and those crazy stuff and all that kind of the forest and the wild people. Blair Witch. But it might be a good one to rewatch, actually, as a matter of fact. I don't know the Blair Witch Project. Yeah, because it might be a good one to rewatch. See if I don't know. What did you think about the Blair Witch Project? Let's end on that note.
Sure. Um, I know I saw it, but I didn't see it in the theater,
Okay.
and I know a lot of people had a trouble watching it because the camera's like shaky all the time,
Uh-huh.
or a lot of the time. So they were having like trouble, almost like people would like some people were getting like sick to the stomach and stuff like that. I didn't have that issue, but it didn't really strike me. I honestly I don't remember enough about it, but I'm
Yeah.
like a horror movie like fanatic, right? I've watched
Yeah.
especially vampire movies, and uh, it was not scary to me. Blair
Okay.
Witch was
So
not scary to
yeah,
me.
that was observation number one. Yeah, not scary. Generally speaking, not scary for anyone. I didn't have the issue with the camera movement either. What I was it wasn't weird either, right? So in other words, I get you know I can get when something is artsy, um, maybe has a strange conceptual point that's being made, maybe not directly through the plot and the dialogue, but maybe just through the camera and the lighting, for example. Maybe some kind of absurdity being, something, some kind of subtext. Look, I get that. Okay, sure, I can dig those kinds of things, but I didn't get any of that from this, right? It was kind of just like bland. They were just saying their stuff, doing their stuff, and then kind of ended in this kind of weird suspense with the dude standing at the corner and the camera fell down and so the reason I was like, let me watch it again is I was like, I'm hoping against hope that maybe I could find this weirdness. Like, oh, you see, if you see the leaves over there,
Oh goodness.
it's really a metaphor. I got it.
Maybe it's the case that you've lived enough life now to actually be
Yeah.
terrified by it once you watch it.
There you go. Maybe after you have to, yeah, go through your adult years, then you'll see why it was scary AF. But anyways, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much. Come back next week. And also, by the way, case closed on Sunday, 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Sunday it'll be on my channel. And we're gonna be covering it's the typical topical show, highest level conversation on the most relevant topics. Once again, until next time, we are out. How do we take them out? Do we go like this?
Peace.
Peace. Let's go like this.
In the den of iniquity, vicinity no pretty, calamity fi hit we any moment, what a pity. Tomorrow never certain, what dwells behind the curtain, the face of evil smirking with the shifty eyes averting. It's not a steady bubble, that either pop or topple, many will fall and stumble, let the dozers gather rubble. From LA to Colorado, Guinea to Burkina Faso, cannon could reach the towers and the troops will storm the castle. Hey, I say, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. So run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. I say, run, come, make we get it. Because the peace that is bestowed upon the meek is overrated. Lord, run, come, make we get it. Calling all your daughters and your sons, we come forget it. With the rubble steady rising and hearts are compromising, convictions here are stifling, making evil appetizing. The fists are steady forming and countenance is falling. Defenses are withdrawing, possibilities are falling. In these your circumstances, evil will make advances. Pick up your sword and lances and be sure to take your stances. Victory is never promised, the battle is upon us. Gather the brave and honest and the righteous in your corners.